Hey everyone, welcome to Marvel-ous Movie Mondays. I feel like it's been a while since y'all have seen our faces together, and it's because it has been a while. Last week we did take a week off for the holiday for Easter. The week before we did take a week off because of April Fools, which no certain reason. We just had busy stuff in our lives, and we put out a little blooper reel for you. So we haven't like talked to you and addressed you in quite a while. But Kelsey, how are
Mm.
you doing? Good to see you.
I am doing great, Jill. I've watched so much stuff. I feel like there's so much stuff we need to talk about.
Yeah, I know.
And when I
There's so
say
much
so
stuff.
much stuff, I really just mean I watched all of Empower, the docu series that Zoe Saldana
Oh, cool,
like
cool.
front ran for
Yeah,
showcasing the women in Marvel.
yeah. Well,
Um
let's open with that. Tell me about it. You finished it? You said.
Sure,
Yeah.
yeah. There's 4 episodes. There's one on the women of Wakanda, Captain Marvel, Scarlet Witch, and Gamora.
Mm.
And they range from like 30 minutes to like 50 minutes. So, yeah, it was just like super cool hearing from not only the actors who play the characters but also the women behind the creative
Mhm.
team. And we got to hear a little bit from what's her name, Ruth, of the woman who won the
Oh,
costume design
Ruth
now.
Carter. Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yes. So it
Captain
was
Carter.
interesting. Yeah. Literally, the real life Captain Carter. Um, and we got to hear from her a little bit about the costume design when it came to like the women, and it was just like so interesting. Like we never really sorry, I just got distracted by something. Um we never really thought about how like like the king of Wakanda is like guarded and protected by a group of women warriors, and I think that that's just like so cool and like
Yeah.
progressive that
Mhm.
this is like something in the comic books that like came to be. And I just don't think we ever really truly gave the Dora Milaje the credit they deserve as this like badass group of women.
Yeah, I agree.
um so it was like great to like showcase them um in the Captain Marvel episode. I remember I think I took some notes while I was watching it. um Here's Daredevil scene. Oh, Empower. Oh yeah. Okay, now I remember.
It's all
Oh,
coming back
what
to you now.
I
This is like
really
3 weeks of notes all piling up on us.
no,
We can
yeah,
really air the
literally.
laundry.
um yeah, and it was just so cool like hearing all the women talk about like kind of different like definitions of femininity. And it,
Mm.
it was like the Dora Milaje with like their shaved heads and how like that's like so like cool and badass. We don't usually associate like baldness with being super feminine, but like
Right.
still they're kind of like reclaiming that in their own way.
Mhm.
And what was super interesting about the Scarlet Witches episode was that I loved hearing Elizabeth Olsen talk about how she kind of approached, playing Wanda slash the Scarlet Witch from a lens of like mental health.
Mm.
And especially when it came to WandaVision, it was so interesting hearing them break down like how different episodes. I think we had this theory at some point that like all the different episodes represented a different
Stage of
stage
grief
of
or
grief.
stage of yeah.
Yeah, and so they were like the first 2 were like denial, and then like 3 through like 3 and 4 were bargaining, or whatever say order they go in. But it was just so interesting that she kind of like always saw Wanda as someone who at her core is just looking for like that mental
Mhm.
stability, and
Yeah.
clay and recognizing that they're not okay mentally. And I just thought that that was such an interesting take to hear about. And then when it came to Gamora's episode, Zoe and Karen kind of really talked about how much they loved working together, because even though their characters are fighting a lot, Gamora and Nebula, they felt this like immediate kinship and this immediate like sisterhood like
Nice.
off screen just
Yeah.
because they were one of the only two women like
Yeah, yeah.
on the project. So they
Mhm.
immediately like, really found this like actual sisterly bond. Obviously off screen because for all of Guardians 1 they're fighting, and then Guardians 2 they really don't find that moment until the end. And it was also just really interesting in that episode to hear, because for a majority of them they didn't really have a lot of like the men who are behind these movies on, just because it wasn't for them.
That
It's
wasn't the focus. Yeah, yeah.
not their time. So they had, we heard from like female editors. I don't remember. I don't think Anna Boden was in the Captain Marvel episode. I think she must have been busy or
Probably
something.
not. If it is this on Disney Plus?
Yeah.
Yeah, I have a feeling even if Kevin Feige isn't behind this specific documentary series, I don't think he's gonna let anything Anna Boden says uh, air on Disney Plus, because I remember Anna Boden and Ryan Fleck not having the kindest words to say about how their movie was essentially not being allowed to be directed by them. Like one of those like
Oh,
studio interference
okay.
type things. I don't know the extent of that, but like it makes sense why she probably didn't get like a spotlight to talk about it. But which is
Yeah.
unfortunate. But you know,
But it was just so interesting to hear, we heard a little bit from James Gunn during the
mm,
Gamora episode, which I really
sure.
wasn't bothered by because he just had such good insightful things to say, and
Hmm.
it almost like meant more that it was coming from a man.
Yeah.
And it was just like if only more men kind of spoke this way about
Hmm.
women and women relationships featured on camera, I think the industry would be wildly different.
I agree.
But he talked about just like this great moment at the end of Guardians 2 when Gamora and Nebula like hug and kind
Hmm.
of like have their makeup moment like right at the end, and it's like Gamora goes like full in like full body hug, and all Nebula is able to really offer at at that time is just like a little like hand on the back like kind of pat thing. And he was like talking about how shooting that scene he was like crying the whole time because he just felt like this was going to be the start of something really great for them moving forward. But anyway, so that was
Yeah.
Empower.
Nice.
We also got in the spirit of talking about women in Marvel, we also got the Marvels trailer
Yes, we
or
did.
teaser trailer.
Yeah, yeah.
um
It's a very, very brief teaser, to the point where honestly I sent it to you and I really can't recount much of what happens. It seemed like a lot of
yeah.
body swapping, a lot of
Yes.
Amon Villani, a lot of interesting
Yes.
visuals. Yeah, I'm interested for it. Yeah.
Definitely interesting visuals. That's definitely the word to use for it, Jill.
It piqued
Um,
my interest. That's what that means.
piqued my interest for sure. I mean, I'm hoping that the movie looks a little bit better than what we
I
saw in the
agree.
teaser trailer.
Yeah, yeah.
But
It's the
as far
most
as like,
disliked trailer on YouTube in Marvel history, but like again, it's I think
okay,
that's
well,
a lot of the anti-feminist Captain Marvel haters just like
yeah,
disliking it before watching it type thing. So I don't really bring that into account much. But again, it's not the best
right.
trailer. It's a little rough around the edges.
Yeah, for sure. And like I will definitely, I will admit that. I'm not, I won't just say good things just
Right,
because
right.
I feel like good things should be said. But I will say that plot wise, we got a little bit of like kind of a teaser of what the Marvels is going to be like at the end of Miss Marvel when, you know, um,
Carol
Kamala.
shows up in
Yes.
Kamala's bedroom. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. But it was interesting to see, Monica Rambeau being included on all of this, and just how there's going to be like looks like a lot of like location swapping and body swapping, and it looks like it's definitely going to be, it looks like it's going to be a lot of fun, and I'm actually
Mhm.
really excited for this team up. I know that going in when we first heard that, it was going to be a team up film, that we weren't super excited just because we thought that Carol might, at least have one more movie just standing on her own 2 feet. But I just think that the dynamic between the three of them, especially with Kamala Khan, like I'm
Right.
just so excited for the shenanigans they're gonna
Yeah. Because the
all
three of them
get
couldn't be
up into.
any more different, which is so
Right.
exciting. And we get Goose back. There's a shot of Goose, a Flurkin,
Yes.
or at least
Yes,
one
we
of
do.
them. I assumed it was Goose.
I definitely saw a goose, and I think at some point in the trailer there was like a whole shot of a bunch of cats slash flurkins. So
Hmm.
I'm like, do we just like go to a whole flurkin planet because that could
I'm down.
be really
I'm down.
fun.
I'm down. Was there any other news that came out this week? I have news, but it's more like serious, like heavy news rather than like trailers and all that stuff.
Oh
I
no.
don't think we got any other trailers, right?
Um we did have Jeremy Renner's new show on Disney Plus come out,
Right.
and I did
Which
mean to watch at least one episode of that to talk about it, but I just didn't get
mm,
around to it
yeah,
because we
I
had
think
a
it's about
whole second half of a
his like
season.
rehabilitation after his accident, stuff like that. It was called like renovations or something. No renovation.
Renovations.
Yeah,
Well, I thought he was gonna be like building houses or something.
that's what it. Yeah, I think I really don't know what it's centered on, but
Yeah.
yeah, I mean that'll be fun.
Well,
But
what is your
also
news, Dill?
yeah,
Let's
we'll talk
change
a
up
little
the
bit about
mood here.
Jeremy Renner later. I mean, this is kind of along the lines of like women in Marvel and unfortunate stuff about women in Marvel. This actually happened like in March, but we just haven't talked about it yet. And that's Victoria Alonso got fired from Marvel. She was the basically the right hand man to Kevin Feige. She has been a producer on the films since Iron Man. She is the head of the combating against the removal of gay themes in the Marvel films. She's been like the big number one supporter of Black and LGBT and Latino Latinx representation in Marvel. She's been kind of like spearheading that. And in 2021, I believe she got promoted to overseer of the visual effects branch. And I think that's kind of where a lot of people are trying to point the blame, saying she got fired because the visual effects department has been getting a lot of heat. And it's interesting because like originally when this happened, a lot of people were saying, "Oh, she got fired because she was toxic to work with in the visual effects department." Um, and then more news came out that apparently the reason she got fired has nothing to do with the visual effects performance, but more so about the fact that she apparently breached her contract to work on producing a film for Amazon called Argentina 1985, which was nominated for Best International Film at the Oscars. And apparently, according to her contract, she's not allowed to work on anything out of Marvel, or if she does, she's not allowed to like advertise it or promote it in any way. And I guess because it was picking up Oscar steam, she was promoting it. And I guess that is the reason, at least that's the said reason online as to why she's fired. But this is big for a few reasons. It's big because this is like kind of like the main woman voice behind Marvel, essentially from a production standpoint, being fired. So now it's Kevin Feige, and we don't know who his new right hand man is going to be.
Right.
And she was also, as what we said, very big on diversity. She is a Latin woman herself, and she was very big in promoting it. It's why we got the America Chavez stuff in Doctor Strange. They were going to cut it out because they wanted to release it internationally, and she said, "No, we're keeping it in if we don't release it internationally. So what? I want this in the movie," and
Hmm.
it got in the movie. So it's kind of one of those things where that is really harmful. I think the fact that she's not there, but also, I mean, hearing that she was kind of a bit uh, dictatorish in the visual effects department is also tough to hear because we've heard all the horror stories about how overpaid and underworked those workers are. So it's like one of those very sticky situations, which I'm sure we'll get more information about as the weeks go on. But yeah, she was fired in March, and there are varying stories on why. And right after that, literally a week later, we find out, of course, that Jonathan Majors gets arrested, which oh, you were Kelsey is off of social media the past few weeks. Jonathan Majors gets arrested for allegedly beating his girlfriend outside a bar in Brooklyn, and to where she was
No.
hospitalized. And then we haven't heard yet. It was one of those things where the charges were dropped, but we get evidence. It's something you should probably look into. I'm not going to go too deep into it, but basically the evidence they gave was a text message from the girlfriend basically telling him it's fine, we'll tell him this, we'll tell him this. Very much sounds like a victim kind of admitting her guilt because she has to almost. And I don't want to make this like a podcast about whether someone's innocent, whether someone's not. But it didn't look great for him. So I think Marvel's dealing with a lot right now. They've got the whole Victoria Alonso thing, and now they've got essentially the face they're building Phase 5 around is now in the media for very negative reasons. And even if he is cleared, ever since that news came out, a lot of people who went to school with him at Yale have come forward to talk about his behavior, his violent behavior, his um, kind of toxic workplace uh, um, attitudes and practices. They've come forward to talk about them more and more. So it's kind of snowballing. A lot of drama at Marvel behind the scenes, and that's why I hate that I followed up all your cool stuff about the Zoe Saldana series with all the unfortunate stuff going on at Marvel. But again, the Jonathan Majors thing doesn't seem like it's totally finalized, so I don't want to like say for a fact what is or what is not happening. But it's just something to keep an eye on. Victoria Alonso though did get fired. That is true. So yeah, Marvel's kind of in the trenches right now. Kelsey, I guess I think you might have gone on vacation for this, so maybe you like just avoided this news altogether. But yeah, this
Well,
kind of like sent shockwaves through the Marvel community for sure.
I saw one really vague TikTok that was like, "What are we gonna do now that with like Jonathan Majors?" But like they
Hmm.
didn't say anything specific about what he
Yeah.
did. And because it was only one video, I like clicked on the comments and I was like, "What are people talking about? Like, what's going on?"
Hmm.
But I didn't see anything. And then I only saw that one video, so I was like, "Okay, maybe it was just a rumor. Maybe like something weird
Right.
happened." I wasn't sure. But oh my god, I'm so disappointed
Yeah.
to
And
learn this.
yeah, and the first thing I said when it happened, because this news also came out in March, but like the first thing I said was, if the first jump of people's minds is OMG, what's gonna happen with the Marvel universe? I think that's we're such good
Problematic.
fans that like we need to like be first and foremost concerned about the people's whose lives are affected.
Right.
Like um Victoria Alonso did lose her job, and we don't know necessarily if she was the reason for it based on her behavior or not. But like, still, she lost her job. Like, she's had that job since Iron Man. Jonathan Majors, his girlfriend's who we should be thinking about right now. Like she's the one who
Mhm.
was in the hospital with severe injuries. So it's like we got to think of the victims first, and then once we start to hear more of the story, then we can start to decide whether or not we personally on our own volition want to excuse what he did or forgive what he did or accept that he didn't do it if he didn't do it. But again, it's one of those things where before you can even question what's going to happen with the universe, because honestly, with the multiverse, they really can recast Kang if they want to. And even if they do
Yeah.
keep him as Kang, he is the villain. So maybe it makes it stronger of a case to want to hate him. But again, you don't want to throw all this money at him either if that's the case, if he is a scumbag.
Right.
So it's a really sticky situation. But I did want to address it because we haven't done it on the show yet. And I did want to bring it up because I know a lot of people have been like kind of going crazy with the news, like what are we going to do? I mean, this is literally the one person who was like kind of thriving the most right now had the
Yeah.
most to lose. And it sucks if this is true and he did do this, which I'm not going to say right now whether it's true that he did or not, but I'm leaning toward just seeing the victim's text message, all this stuff. I'm leaning toward that way. I really think it's a shame to see someone throw away something so good so fast. But
Right.
I don't want to dwell on this too much. We can talk more about it off air. I'm sure if people have questions or comments, I'm sure we'll get more news as it goes along, especially if they do decide to recast him. We'll obviously probably have a whole video about that. But I do think a lot of people came here to hear about Daredevil, so we might as well talk a little bit about Daredevil. Um, Kelsey, do you have any other words before we get on to the Daredevil stuff?
Yeah, I'm just gonna have to look into this. I had no idea that
Yeah.
this happened.
Yeah, sorry to drop the
Um,
bomb while we're
there's
mid recording.
there's some like, you know, like pop culture sites that are saying that, he's rumored to be replaced in the MCU, but we'll
Yeah,
see
that
what
stuff is
happens.
not even that stuff I don't even think I don't even think Marvel's at that phase yet. They just want to first figure out what they're doing because you know to fire the second in command at Marvel and then immediately have to like deal with the biggest villain of the franchise, like that's a lot. To
Yeah.
where I don't envy their predicament, but at the same time it's like sometimes you think maybe they put themselves in that predicament. Um but again, that's with all jobs. Sometimes background checks don't go that far, and maybe they didn't ask all of the Yale students who went with the Yale with Jonathan Majors before they cast him how his behavior was. Maybe they didn't
Right.
um, maybe they didn't read the contract deep enough about Argentina 1985 when she went on to produce that. Like weird things that happen. But there are a lot of videos out there that break it down. I can send you. But I mean, we are here to talk about Daredevil. So Kelsey, there's not really an easy way to transition. It's been 20 minutes. Wow. We really know how
Yeah.
to talk. Do you want to? How do you want to transition into Daredevil? And I know, we
Well,
we 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 don't always have the lot to say about each episode specifically, but I
yeah.
mean, I definitely think there's a lot to talk about here. So let's transition in.
Well, okay, so we're talking about the second half of season 2. So we started back up again with episode 7, titled Semper Fidelis. I'm doing my best at how to say that. And basically we jump right into the Punisher's trial. For killing all the gang members and the dogs of hell and the Irish mob and doing all that stuff. And basically like the angle they want to take is that he's mentally ill and not completely
Mm,
healed from his time at war, and then especially like losing his family so tragically. Like that's the kind of angle they want to take for the jury, that he shouldn't be um sent to prison. He should be institutionalized, put in a mental facility where he can properly, unpack his grief and heal. And, that's kind of why he did all these awful things. Um, and so it's like taking on basically like uh, the feel of a very much a lawyer show.
mm,
Um, and then so in like episode 8, Elektra gets hurt. Oh, the return of Stick.
mm-hmm.
Oh, the colonel takes a stand. So the guy who is like his like main, his like leader, I don't know army terms, but like, the guy who
Colonel.
like was the colonel who's like running the mission that
Yeah.
the team that he was part of, took the stand and had some very nice things to say about him, like really painted Frank in a much better light for the jury. But then all of a sudden Frank takes a stand, completely throws his case, goes
Mm-hmm.
straight to jail.
Yeah.
He's like, no, I did it because I liked it and I do it again. And he's just
Yeah.
going off the walls. And they're just like, oh my God, we
Yeah,
almost
this
had
was
this.
this was nuts. Like I really
Yeah.
didn't see this coming. And for anyone who doesn't know, like who hasn't been following our series, like we don't know what's coming. Like this is one of those shows
Yeah.
where we are literally blind going in. Whereas I feel like other stuff we at least have an inkling of what's gonna happen from trailers and stuff, but like the trailers are so far removed at this point to where we really don't know what's gonna happen, don't even know who's
Yeah.
gonna show up, and another character shows up very soon. But like, yeah, seeing him kind of like break out of that, because I knew at least something was going to happen. It couldn't go this easy.
Sure. Yeah.
So it was definitely an exciting, but also like, oh, come on, you were so close moment.
Yeah. I don't know. I had some hope for Frank, just because I felt like Karen, of like, if anyone was going to get through to him, it was going to be her. And that she was, I thought
Mm,
that, she was kind of having like a breakthrough with him, like, like talking to him about his family and like how like this isn't, what they would want for him. And, this isn't the way to like deal with the loss of your family. But I don't remember why he throws the case. I think he just gets like angry and is like, I'm not sick. I'm not like mentally ill. I did
right.
this all like in my right mind.
Yeah. And he doesn't want to
It
lie.
was
Yeah, he's
right.
and that's what's so interesting about that character too. He's like, he's not wrong. Like he's. I mean, he is wrong for doing what he's some of what he's doing, but he like
Yeah.
stands by it. But it's also like we know it's well intentioned, and he doesn't want to hide behind that. He doesn't want to try to put on someone he's not. And I appreciate that boldness, but at the same time, it's like it makes for a very tough dynamic when the whole point of this law show is to like make sure you say the right things and you do the right procedures and stuff, and like we're gonna get you less time, all this stuff, and then he just completely throws it out the window. But I thought that was fascinating from a character
Yeah.
standpoint.
Frank Castle's kind of a tough cookie, because he
Mm,
seems very unmovable, and just when you think you've gotten through to him, he turns around and just shoots someone. So it's
right.
like he's very set in his ways. He's very stubborn. He feels like, killing all these people is the only way he's going to feel satisfied at the end of the day. So it's kind of like, it makes for a very good antagonist, I would say.
Yeah.
But as far as character development goes, I wonder if he undergoes more in his own show. But
Mm,
I'm curious to see like where he kind of goes from here.
yeah.
Because, at the end of the day, he is only killing bad people and
Well,
people
that's
that
what I
are
was saying. Yeah,
doing
like,
bad
yeah, he's like
things.
right for who he's going after. It's just also like the whole
He's
Matt
going
Murdock
about it in the
versus
wrong
Frank Castle
way.
thing. Yeah, like, do you
Yeah.
kill or do you harm? And yeah, like I gotta say, he is the standout of the season to me. Like Frank
Yeah,
Castle's
for
story,
sure.
and I think that's my like biggest qualm of these episodes is whenever it would go back to like Daredevil and Elektra, I just wasn't as interested. Like the most
Yeah.
interesting stuff for me this whole season was Frank and Karen, and just like to where like there were moments where Foggy would show up. I'm like, oh yeah, you're here. Like literally all I
Right.
wanted to know was Frank's story, and like I didn't care about the other stuff with Stick and Elektra and all this stuff. I just wanted to watch, you know, Frank, and that's why the best stuff with Daredevil is when they bring him into it with Frank, and then of course when we get to Kingpin with Kingpin, like that stuff is the best part of the season
Right.
for me. To where I think it honestly kind of peaks here in the middle because this is the most Frank centric stuff. To where the very end,
Mhm.
like the last two episodes are very much not about Frank at all. It's more about
Mhm.
Elektra. So it's like and I said last time I was like I'm just not reeled in by the electric character yet. I don't know why, and I'm still not. But it's one of those things where I think Frank is just such a great presence that I feel like they almost kind of had to sideline him in his own show. They needed to kind of put him in a different box because he was starting to steal so much thunder away from the main character, and they wanted to kind of refocus it back because I think most people were leaving that season being like, "What's Frank up to next?" rather than "What's Matt up to next." And I think a lot of people wanted
Mhm.
to like kind of counteract that because you don't want that in your best show where you're like, oh wait, yeah, we need you to care about our main character.
Right. And so the big, twist at the end, or whatever you'll call it, at the end of
Reveal,
episode
yeah,
8 is that Frank meets Wilson Fisk in prison.
yeah,
And, they kind of end on like this great line where, it's going to be him, but they don't reveal his face while he's like pumping iron, and you're like, "Oh, who's he going to talk to? I wonder who this is going to be." And Vincent D'Onofrio turns around and is like, "So, I see you got my message." And I'm like, oh my God, like what's Frank going to get himself up into? So then we have episode 9, 7 Minutes of Heaven, which is,
yes.
I think, maybe the strongest
Oh,
episode,
oh yeah.
but uh,
It's my favorite by a mile. Like this episode was
just so
freaking
much
awesome.
happened. So
Yeah.
much happened in this episode. So basically, like, we start off getting a little backstory about, Wilson Fisk's first days in prison, and him kind of like adjusting to prison life, and him, trying to figure out like who he can trust, who he can't, who's gonna work for him basically, because what is a mob boss with no mob?
Yeah.
He's gonna figure that out. Um and then we kind of were introduced, our B plot kind of throughout this whole season has been like the Elektra um stuff. So we kind of get introduced to these people called the Hand.
Hmm.
New enemy, question mark, I wrote down. Um and so basically, like, we get to the crux of what Wilson Fisk wants with Frank Castle, and he's like, so like, I want to give you the opportunity to kind of like take on these guys who were either responsible for the death of his family, or were just happened to be there, or like
Mm,
they know the person that is responsible for his family's death. um and Frank, God love him, in these moments, he's not gonna be, whipped by Wilson Fisk right off the bat. He's like, okay, and so what's in it for you? Like, I'm not gonna be your hitman. Um, I'm not gonna be your hitman and then, be on your beck and call, whatever. Like, this isn't how this is gonna work. And Wilson Fisk says, well, I kind of want that guy dead too, because he's making my time in here kind of hard.
yeah.
So at the end of the day, Frank does take him up on his offer and is like, listen, I'm going to do this one thing for you, and this is going to be it. And I'm thinking, oh, that's not how it works with Wilson Fisk. I'm like, once he gets his claws in you, there's
Yep.
no way out of it. So I'm like, nervous for Frank in these moments. There's tensions are running high between Nelson and Murdoch. They have this really intense conversation about how they're going to shut down their law firm. And they're like talking about their law firm, but also like they're friends at the end of the day. Like, first and foremost, they're colleagues, but they're
Mhm.
also friends, and they're kind of having this strange conversation that's like, maybe we're better off kind of without each other. Or really, it
Mhm.
was mainly Matt who was like, you guys are kind of better off without me. Like, you and Karen are smart, like very capable people. Like, you will be fine. But I just have to deal with everything else that's going on in Daredevil's life right now, with this whole Elektra and Stick coming back and all of that.
Mhm.
Um, so basically, like, we find out, and this is when I kind of got a little confused. So Castle goes to shiv the guy. He like has
Yeah.
a shiv
Yeah.
and in prison, and he finds out that his family was killed through like a sting operation. So it was all
Mhm.
like very purposeful.
Yeah.
And then he gets a name. He's like, who did it? Like, who were you working for? And so we get this name, the blacksmith. And then so he gets into a fight. It's him versus 7 guys.
Yeah.
He kills all of them.
Yeah, so
It's
the title of the episode is quite literally the 7-minute one take fight scene of him fighting these 7 guys in the hallway. 7 minutes in heaven, basically. Not one take, but
yeah,
you know what I mean. Like, it's a
yeah, yeah, yeah.
one big action scene for 7 minutes,
Right,
and it is
right.
probably my favorite thing I've seen in any Marvel television show, MC or otherwise. Like, this fight scene is the best filmmaking technique I've seen since, like,
Yeah.
I don't even know, the Endgame, Infinity War, and this came out before then. But, like, like, of that vein
No.
of, like, the old, like, Phase 1, Phase 2, like, Winter Soldier, like, I love this fight scene, it was so good.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was just like he's like in a white jumpsuit too, so the blood is just so much more like emphasized and like
Mhm.
noticed like throughout all
Yeah.
this, like, and he's just like a badass. Like, he doesn't give a fuck. He takes down these 7 guys, and then he just stands up and he's just covered in blood. And I was like, oh my god, like, this guy, like, you want to not root for him, but you kind of root for him at the same time, you know what I mean?
Mhm.
Because he's a bad guy. He's killing all these guys, but it's like he's so cool that, like, I don't know, I find myself really rooting for Frank
Yeah.
Castle.
I know, and that's what's so weird is, like, it's like an anti-hero thing. It's like you can't be a
Yeah.
full-on villain when you're, like when you wanna hoorah for them when they do what they do. Like, Thanos we
No,
never
yeah.
cheered for, you know what I mean?
No, never.
Yeah.
Um, and then we have these like Castle versus Wilson Fisk moments where I'm just like, I'm like, why is this guy so like unbeatable?
Mhm.
Like, is it just because he's big? What is his deal? Because I feel like if Frank also was handcuffed during this moment where they got into their
True.
little
Yeah.
tiff. So I'm
Yeah.
like, if Frank was at like full capacity, full health, hadn't just taken on 7 guys by himself, I feel like he could easily take out Wilson Fisk. Like,
Right. And I think it's one of those things where it's like it's still based on a comic book suit, so things are still emphasized. It's just it feels like it should be so much more naturalistic. Like his strength
yeah,
is much more heightened for the sake of a TV show than like he normally would be if it was just a regular old show. I think we
yeah.
sometimes forget. And I don't remember if they ever go into any backstory on like him getting any sort of like powers or anything. I just think it's just brute strength.
Yeah, which is
Uh,
like crazy because he like Frank gets in some good punches, but at the end of the day, like uh Fisk is still like just able to overpower him, and I'm just like, this is unknown territory for Frank because he's been taking on all these baddies this entire season and pretty much coming out, with barely a scratch on him. But he's beaten he's taken some hits in prison. Um, and then we find out that Matt has this guy has come back from the dead. His name's Nobu. And he's alive some way somehow. The last we saw of him was he
yeah.
was burned seemingly to death, but obviously not. And then we jump right into episode 10, The Man in the Box. And oh my god, and then we have this like horror movie element like episode where these people are getting drained for their
Drained. Yeah.
blood. I called them the zombie children. They all looked young. They
Yeah.
didn't none of them. And so now Claire Rosario Dawson's
Yeah. She's back.
character is back. Um, and she's treating these people in this like closed down wing of the hospital. And oh my God, the DA gets killed in this episode.
Yeah, that was nuts. Cause like,
That was
yeah,
crazy.
and I don't love, but, like, it's interesting when I see scenes where it's, like, everything's kinda chill, like, they're all in, like, an office, and then all of a sudden, boom, like, something can change right away, like, there was that
Yeah,
moment where I was like, "Alright, this is kinda your cool down moment where they're all kinda talking
right.
about what their next step is," and then boom, she's gone, and that was definitely jarring for sure.
Yeah, it's kinda like the Alfred Hitchcock thing where he, like, wants you to think that you're safe, and
Yes.
then you're in a white shower that's well lit, and then all of a sudden you're getting stabbed through the curtain. So it's
Right.
it's it's like the same thing. Um, but yeah, that was unexpected, that was crazy. Matt basically puts 2 and 2 together before anyone else can, and is like, "Okay, if Frank Castle was sent to cell block D, he's absolutely, getting involved with Wilson Fisk. I have to get to the bottom of this." Goes to meet Wilson Fisk and basically just like starts talking about Vanessa and his family, and that's when Fisk absolutely loses it, you know, beats, roughs Matt up a little bit. Um, Elektra tries to flee the country in this episode. Um, oh, oh, right. Okay, so then Karen is like all disappointed because, oh yeah, did I mention that Castle escaped from prison?
Yes.
That's
Well,
important.
and that's also, like, one of the things with the Kingpin, he's like, "I'll do you one, you do me one" type thing,
Yeah,
and he kinda
exactly.
sneaks him out as a cop, right? He's dressed as an officer, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Like one of the prison guards or something, and that's how he's able to get away. But that's what I'm
Yeah.
saying. Like with Fisk, it's like the favors are never ending. Like you don't
No,
just
no.
do one thing. Like
Right.
there's gonna be another debt you need to owe at some point.
Mhm.
But Karen's all disappointed because she felt like she had this friendship sort of esque type relationship with Frank, and she's like, oh, now he's back on his bullshit. He just shot up the DA. He appears in her apartment, um and she pulls the gun on him. Maybe that's the next episode. Oh, this episode just ends with Frank finding Karen and they get shot at, and
Yes.
then oh
Well, we didn't the Wilson Fisk Matt face off happens in this episode too, right? Or is that the next
yeah,
one?
yeah,
Yeah.
that's what I said.
Is that what you just
I
said? Sorry. It
Yeah,
cut
no,
out
I
for a
talk.
sec. Yeah.
No, I'm sorry. Yeah. So Matt goes to see Kingpin, and he like roughs him up a little bit because he was talking
Yeah.
about he like brought up Vanessa and was like,
Right,
"Don't
right.
speak her name."
No, I love
Um,
yeah, I just wanna talk about that really quick. Like, I
yeah.
love the dynamic there because it's like this whole season, like I said, like Matt was like not really the main focus for me. It was all about Frank and kind of
Mhm.
Karen, but then this is where I'm like, all right, we're back in now. Like, because now Daredevil's like up front with Kingpin. Like, this is the stuff I love to see, and it was just such a good scene between the two of them. So high stakes, high tension. So I just wanted to bring that up specifically.
No, yeah. And it's like the balls on Matt to just like go. He's like,
Yeah.
I want to talk to him. And like,
Right.
knowing that he can't, as Matt Murdock, he can't like all of a sudden be like good at combat and like really defend
Right.
himself super
Yeah.
well. So like he kind of just has to like take the hit.
Hmm.
Um which was, yeah, it was, I was like, wow, the bravery this man has. It's truly unmatched. And then at the end of this episode, we get the zombie children are all up and around, and he killed his dad. The
Yeah.
dad who was just trying to save his son killed
Mhm.
him. And then the members of the hand, they all look like ninjas.
Yeah. They're all
And they come
scaling the buildings. Yeah.
yeah, they scale the hospital, and they steal the children back.
Mm.
And that's kind of where we ended. And then episode 11 is called .380, which I read that and I was like, huh, my GPA in high school. But I was thinking
Yes, that's exactly what the
3.8.
episode was about. Yeah. Yep. Point
uh,
three. Wow. That
point
is
three. That was my
you
graduating
you
GPA.
did one test. Every other test you sat out.
Yeah,
Point
no.
three eight zero.
So they steal the children back, and then Frank meets up with Karen, and it's important that Frank knows that he was not behind what happened to the DA. He was like, that wasn't me. I like I need you to believe me. So then they actually end up getting shot up at her apartment. And I just loved, okay, this happened twice. And I don't know, maybe I'm just a little sucker, but the first time at the DA, when they got shot up, Matt dives over Karen, protects
Yeah.
her. And
Yep.
then this time around, Frank, same thing, dives over Karen, protects her. I'm like, I just want a man who will protect me from getting shot at. Is that too much to ask? So then they have this whole conversation in this diner,
Mm.
and basically he ended up like using her as bait to get
Yeah, that was
someone
shitty.
else. So
And
he
it
was
even like got in her head with the whole like, you love him, right? You love Matt. Like you love him, don't let him go. Which I think there's some truth to that with like the whole like,
sure.
the fact that his loved ones aren't even there. Like if you love something, don't
Yeah.
let it go. But also like
Right.
just knowing the whole time when you rewatch it that he's setting her up basically, or not really setting her up, but like using her as a way to set himself up essentially to lure them all
Yeah.
into him. That's shitty because like the Karen Frank Bond in this season is just so interesting to where like
Yeah.
they really take so many ups and downs, and this seemed like kind of the pinnacle end moment of it.
Yeah. I was like watching this and I was like, do I ship Karen
And
and
Frank?
Frank? Yeah.
No. No. I mean,
I don't know.
I'm ready to eat my words. I'm ready for season 3 to go back on that, but I don't know.
I mean,
Maybe
who knows?
we know she doesn't
So
end up with Matt because Matt ends up with Jennifer Walters. So who knows?
right. So we'll see. Um well, so basically like Matt and Frank are both hunting now this guy called the blacksmith. And he like finds this guy. Oh, the zombie children are getting drained. Elektra is trying to get to Stick. Uh, a lot's happening. This is the boat episode. This was when I
Mm.
stopped taking notes. So I don't have
Oh,
notes on
okay,
the last two episodes, but
right.
I watched them recently enough that I remember
Yeah.
what happened.
Well, because it's also kind of
Um,
the end of the Frank Castle story. Because, like, I
right,
mean, well, not really. Like, he still has to kill the guy, but it's like after this, it kind of the season ends with Elektra, which I think was an interesting
right.
moment. Like, it ending more with the Elektra storyline than the Frank stuff. I mean, there's still some Frank stuff in the finale, but like, I feel like this was kind of where it hit like its final peak in this last
Right.
episode.
So this is when he thought he found the blacksmith, but the guy was lying. He wasn't the actual blacksmith. And
Hmm.
then this
The
like
actual
other
blacksmith
gang.
is Mr. Krabs, who really known as Clancy Brown, who I texted you.
Right.
I was like, "This is Mr. Krabs,"
Yes.
just FYI,
Wait,
because he's such a versatile actor.
after you said that, Dill, I was like, I was watching the episode and I was like, shit, that is Mr. Krabs. Like you can kind of hear it in some of the lines that he says. And he's like, oh, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that kind of like rasp he does for Mr. Krabs. Um, but yeah, and then like the boat explodes, and then basically everyone thinks that Frank Castle's dead. Like he's
Mm,
pronounced dead after this whole incident. And then episode 12, we jump into an Elektra backstory, which I
mm.
feel like would have been super helpful to get when she
When we
was
first
first
met her,
introduced at the
I
beginning
agree.
of the season.
Yeah, this is
Because
also
this is,
where. Yeah,
yeah,
go ahead. Sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, like, this episode is the one that, like, actually made me care about her. Because before, she was just kind of introduced as, like, this, I don't know, like, half love interest, this ex girlfriend to Matt Murdock. And that wasn't the most interesting thing about her. The most interesting thing about her is that she was also raised by Stick, raised to be
Mm,
this, like, killing machine. She has this kind of, like, darkness inside of her that she can't always, um, stop and prevent from coming out. And you know we just like get these like good shots of her as like a young girl like being trained
yeah,
as this
it
assassin.
reminded me of Maya a little bit in Hawkeye
Right.
Echo. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And then what else happened
What
in
I
this
was gonna say
episode?
is along that line though, like the whole thing with like I agree, like Elektra, I wasn't sold on her until this episode, but I wish it had just come earlier because like by now I had almost kind of like Frank's storyline I thought was coming to an end because he killed the guy he thought was the blacksmith. So I was like, all right, it's kind of done. To where like this
Right.
last 2 episodes, I really kind of felt the length because I was like, all right, now what? Like now all I
Right.
really need is Matt to tell Karen he's Daredevil because I know that's coming, but I'm like
Right.
everything else, I'm like all right, we can speed this up a little bit because I just didn't care enough at that point. And I wish they had put this earlier so I did care a little bit more in this moment. And then
Yeah.
obviously we get a little bit more blacksmith stuff with Frank, but it's also like I wish they had set this up better to where I care more about this finale because it really was much more an Elektra centric finale episodes
Mhm.
than it was Frank. So
Yeah. So then we find out that she is kind of like their fearless leader. Like the hand
the
is
hand,
like
yeah, she's double agent or whatever. Yeah.
she's the black sky, but she didn't realize this about herself. So now it's kind of like, well, you can take over being the leader of this gang because like you're me. Huh.
Sorry, sorry. Yeah, we're recording this. On my for speaking for myself, very little sleep. Sorry, so I apologize about the yawning.
I'm like every
Um,
time you yawn, it's making me yawn because it's contagious.
it is
um
contagious.
But yeah, so we kind of we
She's the leader. Or
she's
yeah,
the black sky, and she kind of has to like fight that, and she really wants to kill Stick because I think she like blames everything that happened to
yeah,
her on
probably,
him.
yeah,
Um but Matt convinces her not to kill Stick, and then they're able to kind of get out all together. And then this season finale, man. I just watched it this morning. What happened?
well, so we kind of get to the whole the big moment being that Elektra does decide to side with Matt and then ultimately
Yeah,
decides to sacrifice herself for Matt and dies in combat, and then
right.
Matt escapes or whatever. It's this emotional moment. Frank kind of helps him out as well. We kind of get that full
Yes.
arc moment of him.
Oh,
Um,
Karen gets kidnapped.
yes,
Karen gets
Karen gets
kidnapped,
kidnapped.
and like all these people. I don't even. There was okay. This is my biggest complaint, Jill. I feel like with the second half of the season is that I just felt like there was so much going on,
Yeah,
and
there's a
like the
lot of
first
different
half,
groups, a lot of people, a lot of mobs. Yeah.
lots of people to keep track of. I didn't understand like this white woman who is like it's like this Japanese run kind of um like vigilante group, if you will. But
Mhm.
then in the center of there's like this random white woman, and I was like, I don't know who you are, or like
Yeah.
what you're doing here, or like who you work for. I don't understand. And then, but
Yeah.
yeah, there was just like so much to keep track
No,
of, and
I
like
agree. Yeah.
the first half of this season was like so much more palatable and watchable, just because it was
Hmm.
so like linear, following like
Hmm.
you know trying to figure out who the Punisher was and why he was doing what he was doing, and then his trial. And then post all of that, they just threw like so much at
Hmm.
us that I was like,
Yeah.
a lot's
Like,
going
almost
on.
I wish if they had ended the season on him getting to the prison almost, and then, like, start the next season
Sure.
with, "Oh, here's the hand, and
Right.
here's Kingpin," like, get it back there, but I will say, like, I think that's my biggest qualm too, is, like, this last 2 episodes in particular just really felt like it was kind of dragging things on too long, adding extra elements that we didn't need, extra reveals that we didn't need to kinda get those, like, big, loud final action sequences, with Daredevil and then like of course Karen. And there's that great moment where like Daredevil kind of saves Karen and they have like this kind of almost intimate moment where he kind of
Right.
gives a little bit of intimacy, but then he realizes, oh, I'm Daredevil, I'm not Matt right now. And
Yeah.
you would think she'd pick up on that then, but she really doesn't, as we see by the ending scene. Like she really doesn't. She's there's something there, but it's more
No,
I think
yeah.
fascination with Daredevil than it is like, oh, it's Matt. Like I don't think it even crossed her mind. Also because why would you ever think your blind friend is this guy, um, yeah, so that
Because
moment I like, but then it,
yeah.
just kinda keeps on going, keeps on fighting. Karen's still in trouble, and then eventually everything kinda like resolves itself. The good guys win. I love how Stick has the final moment of putting that
Yes.
sword through that
Oh,
guy, because he kind of wakes up again. It's the guy who can't die, and then he finally
yes.
gets up and turns
And I
around.
was
And it's very
annoyed.
simple, very swift. Turns around, walk right into the sword. Like I kind of love that.
Yeah.
Very poetic. And he's like, "Now you'll stay dead this time," or something like that. I don't know, but
Yeah.
yeah, just kind of like
And
tying up
then
all the loose threads, and there are a lot of loose threads.
yeah. And honestly, right. So going back to that moment between Matt and Karen when he's Daredevil and he's like, "Hey, are you okay?" And she's like, "Yeah, better now." Um I was like, "Did I miss something? Did Matt tell Karen that he was Daredevil and I just completely like missed it? Like I was
Yeah,
looking down at my phone or something and missed the scene entirely." But I was like, "Oh, no, no, no. She still doesn't know that it's him." Um and then obviously she says right before she dies, like, this isn't the end. But I was like, no, Elektra's not gonna die. They're gonna put her body and do whatever they did to that fucking Nobu guy
I
to
couldn't believe
bring
that.
her back to life.
I didn't see
No,
that
I
coming.
I
You
felt
caught
it.
it. Yeah.
Yeah, I
So there you go.
I
Yeah,
felt
like
it.
that's how it kind of ends with her story. Is she
Yeah.
dies, but she's really not. And then
Right.
Stick and Daredevil are fine. Foggy now has his own practice. Again, I think they really
Right.
sideline him in this last few episodes. Like, kind of just send him off.
Yeah.
They're
And
trying
it's
to give him
sad.
development, but it's like they bring in Carrie Ann Moss, who's a big name actress, to kind of recruit him for this new thing. But it's like
Right.
I was almost really hoping because it was Carrie Ann Moss that she'd put on the sunglasses and bring him into the Matrix. Be like, come with me and be like, oh, this is a Matrix movie now.
Red
That
pill,
didn't
blue
happen.
pill.
Um, yeah. So and then Frank kind of like burns his house and leaves and seems to want to like
Yeah.
kind of start anew because he finally does get his revenge against the actual blacksmith. And then we get the final moment where we kind of been building to, which is Matt and Karen, where he reveals it.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of where we end it, right? That it almost freezes on her face. We don't really know what her response is. She doesn't look too happy, honestly, though. So I'm
I
very interested to see what will happen
I
with
feel
this.
like if someone I was so close to revealed to me that they were like the mass vigilante, I would like the amount of times that she's been around Daredevil and like literally straight up countered him in this episode face to face. I would literally be like, I'm so fucking dumb. Yeah, I would be like, oh, all of this makes so much more sense now. All your cuts and
Yeah.
bruises and your quote unquote alcohol problem and the fact that we were literally just standing like face to face with one another and I still didn't clock it. I would literally be like, my fucking dumbass didn't realize it was you. This is embarrassing. Because what I will say, I think the saving grace for me for this entire second season was that I just really loved that Karen was like her own person like
I
throughout
agree.
the entire season. Like she had her own missions, her own morals to stick to. Like she was never just like this damsel in distress. Like yes, she got captured at the end there, but even still like she was still like very smart. She was talking to that guy with um the probation bracelet on and she was like
Mhm.
turn that shit on so they fucking track us and can save us. And it was like part of that like her quick thinking and like her this like new journey she's taking into journalism with this guy. Like
Yeah.
I think this is the perfect life path for her because she's just like so determined to get to the bottom of things and she's like always looking for answers. And I'm just so appreciative of like how smart and like competent she is. And that like yes, her and Matt like did have like a little bit of a romantic some romance was happening between them. But at the end of the day, like she was still very much like she never really it doesn't feel like she's ever dependent on Foggy or Matt. Like she's
Mhm.
just like her own woman and her own person that like carries like her own arcs and her own like plot lines. And it's just, I'm like, yay, women.
Nice. Yeah, yeah.
Yay,
I
well
really enjoyed
written
Karen.
female
Yeah,
characters.
Karen's story, especially considering how badly they handled Foggy's in terms of like kind of really not knowing what to do with him. Really, I feel
Right,
like they kind of made it the same story all season. It's just like, oh, Matt and Foggy are bickering again, and Foggy
right.
wants to take the law stuff more seriously. I don't know, but now that Karen knows, I'm assuming there will be something interesting added to that trio's dynamic. Um, it's
I
kind of a
hope they
sad
get
moment
the
when he closed out the bar tab that they've had open the whole time. I
yeah.
love the idea of that they've had a bar tab just consistently open that'll never close.
I'm like,
Um,
how
I love
much is
that.
that tab?
Oh, thousands, I'm sure. But yeah, like that's your season, and I really think Frank is the highlight. So I'm interested to see next season. I believe he's still in it, but it's like it's not his story anymore. I don't think.
hmm
It's much more Matt centric again. But I'm very interested to see what they do with Elektra, what they do with Punisher. I've got to look in terms of continuity. If we need to watch the next Punisher, the first Punisher season before Daredevil season 3, I believe that's how it aired. That might help if Punisher is in season 3. So I just got to look at
Okay.
that, and that probably won't be for a little while because after this, where we got Guardians coming up soon, Spider Verse coming
hmm
soon, so we probably won't get back to Daredevil for a little bit. But I like the season incrementally better than the first, and I think it is
Yeah, I
because of
agree.
Frank Castle, and I really do
I
think
agree.
it's because they really gave us like such a compelling antagonist. Not that that Kingpin wasn't, but I think just Frank Castle has so much else going on that makes him
Yeah.
so layered to where, like, Kelsey, you're getting hot for him in this episode. You're falling for him as you talk
I
about him.
I
He's
I'm
multifaceted,
blushing.
he's multidimensional. He's not just your straight up villain. He's got
Yeah.
layers. He's an ogre. He's
And
an onion. So yeah, I'm really excited
honest
to see
yeah.
this go further.
Honestly, Dill, you might hate me for saying this, but I will say I've seen Kingpin now in 2 Marvel projects, Daredevil and Hawkeye, and I don't get it. I don't think. I don't He's not like that interesting to me. He's not
Yeah.
really that compelling. Like he's kind of just
Mhm.
this big dude who just like has a bunch of people do his bidding for him and like
Yeah.
weirdly is able to control all these people, but like why he just like doesn't feel that special to me. Like the more like villains we meet and the more antagonists we get introduced to, I'm like Frank Castle was way more interesting this as the big antagonist this season, you know what I mean? And like
Mhm.
even in Hawkeye, like we didn't need him in Hawkeye. Like we could have just done with like,
Yeah.
you
You
know,
just make Eleanor the crime boss. It would have been so much easier.
Eleanor
I
the
don't know.
crime boss, or
Yeah.
just with the tracksuit mafia and Echo, what's her name, Maya's
Maya.
story,
Mhm.
and Kazi and these
Yeah.
people. So I'm like,
No,
they keep
I
trying
don't
to like
disagree.
weasel him in like different ways.
Yeah.
And I'm just like, I don't think we need him.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think honestly, my favorite iteration is always going to be Spider Verse. I love that version of Kingpin, and I
Mm,
think because it's animated, it makes more sense because you can make him this
yeah,
huge presence to where he punches someone, they go flying across the room.
right.
I think that's kind of where my love for the character comes from. But I agree, like seeing now Frank Castle, it's I think it's such a more interesting antagonist than Kingpin is. But who knows? Maybe season 3 will bring us back around to it. Who knows?
Who knows?
Yeah.
I'm not
But
sold yet.
any final thoughts on season 2 before we sign off?
It was good.
Yeah,
It
solid stuff.
held my attention more than season 1 did, I'll be honest.
Yeah, yeah, I agree.
Um,
Just yeah, a lot going on, but like the stuff that was going on, I think was a little more interesting.
right.
Cool. So we will get back to Daredevil eventually soon before the new series comes out late in the year. But next week, um, we have a week between. So here's how the kind of the schedule is going down. In like 3 weeks, we have Guardians. In 2 weeks, we have Marvel trivia. But next week, we need kind of like some little bridge placeholder type thing. And we just talked a little bit about it earlier. The Jeremy Renner renovations show
Mm,
or whatever. We're not going to
yes.
be renovating any houses or anything, but he is the only one of our original 6 Avengers that we haven't done a movie club for yet. So we said, you know what? He's got a show out on Disney Plus. We never got to do him. We never got to cover his movies when we were talking about Hawkeye, the show. So it's like this is kind of the only real opportunity left to do it,
Yeah.
to where it actually makes some sort of sense with what's going on. So we're going to be doing a Jeremy Renner movie club, and we're talking about kind of 3 basic ones, but I think for good reason, and that's because 2 of them were his Oscar-nominated films, and then the third one. I actually have to remember what the third one is, but the first one is
The
the
one
Hurt
with
Locker.
Elizabeth Olsen.
That's right. Yes, yes, yes. And that's the reason for that. But the first one is The Hurt Locker from 2009, directed by Catherine Bigelow. Historically, Kelsey will love to hear this. The first film ever to have a woman win Best Director for it, and a woman won Best Director.
Love it.
Pretty awesome. And then The Town from 2010, which also stars him in a supporting role, but an Oscar-nominated supporting role again, directed by Ben Affleck. That movie. He actually has a new movie in theaters now called Air, which is awesome. And then most recently, Wind River. Not most recently, but in terms of the 3 movies we picked, Wind River from 2018 or 2017. I think 2017 might be the number, which stars him and Elizabeth Olsen, which is also really, really interesting. It has to talk about indigenous communities, and I think we're gonna have a lot of cool things to say about these movies. Kelsey, have you seen any of these movies in advance ahead of time or no?
I haven't.
Cool. All right, so these are all first watch.
2017 for Wind
2017. I
River,
was
by the way.
cool. So yeah, The Hurt Locker, The Town, and Wind River. We will be talking about all those movies next week for Jeremy Renner Avengers Movie Club, and then we will have covered all 6 original Avengers, as well as some other people like Brie Larson, Tom Holland, Chadwick Boseman. Did we do anyone else in addition to them? I think that's it, right? I
The
don't know.
fact that you just named those 3 so quickly without even thinking about it, I'm impressed.
Thank you.
I
Um,
can't. think
Yes.
of all the movie clubs we've done.
Because we also did, the original 5, which helps, which is easy. Aside
Right.
aside from Jeremy Renner, who we're about to do. We're gonna do Jeremy Renner. And
Heck
we'll do that
yeah.
next week. Kelsey, where can they find you otherwise?
You can find me on Instagram, Kelsey A. Kilpatrick. You could follow me on TikTok at Cause13, or you can check out my YouTube channel, Cause Productions.
There you go. You can follow me at the Dill Pickle Movie Network if you're listening on podcast. I'm sorry when we switched over from Anchor to Spotify, because now Spotify owns Anchor. We actually weren't on the automatic uploads for months, and I didn't realize. So Kelsey, thank you for bringing that to my attention. So I'm in the process of uploading all those manually now, which is fine. It's a little extra work for me every week, but I don't really care. And so I will be uploading every episode now weekly to podcast. I'm sorry for the 2 months you guys have or 3 months now that you guys have gone without our voices on there. But we hope you were able to find your way here to YouTube. And of course, you can find me at Dylan_Randazzo on Twitter and Dylan Randazzo 417 at TikTok. I just posted one for the first time in a while there.
Woo!
Any last words, Kels? I mean, for this week.
Happy birthday, Dill!
Thank you. Yeah, this is airing on my birthday.
This is airing on your birthday.
It's not my birthday now. When we're recording it. So it hasn't hit yet. My quarter life crisis begins tomorrow, which is today.
And your frontal lobe is going to stop developing tomorrow, or today.
Really?
So who you are as a person is who you are for life. So think about that.
Oh my god, that is a lot
hours.
to think about, and I wish someone had given me like that last year to think about. Because now I'm like, I have only how many hours left to think about this, and I'm gonna go take a nap right now because I stayed up too late last night. Wow.
Sleep on it, yeah.
Okay. Well, anyway, thank you guys. We'll see y'all next time.